Now, to a crucial 2 days for European defence. We're talking about it today in perspective, with notably Ukraine and Greenland under the spotlight. First today, NATO leaders are meeting in Brussels with Secretary of State Mark Rutte, set to lay out his priorities. We'll talk about that in a moment. Then tomorrow, the Munich Security Conference, at which last year the US Vice President J.D. Vance stunned his audience with what many called a verbal assault on traditional American allies. Let's remind us what he had to say a year ago.
The threat that I worry the most about vis-a-vis Europe is not Russia, it's not China, it's not any other external actor. And what I worry about is the threat from within, the retreat of Europe from some of its most fundamental values, values shared with the United States of America. As President Trump has made abundantly clear, he believes that our European friends must play a bigger role in the future of this continent. We don't think, you hear this term, burden sharing, but we think it's an important part of being in a shared alliance together that the Europeans step up while America focuses on areas of the world that are in great danger.
J.D. Vance speaking a year ago. Well, this year, the main event is going to be the US Secretary of State Marco Rubio leading a large US delegation, as minds are focused, of course, on Ukraine, Greenland and overall European security. Well, joining us now from Kyiv is Director of the Eurasia Democracy Initiative, Peter Zalmayev. Thanks very much for being with us on the programme. And J.D. Vance, I mean, he certainly didn't upset the apple cart rather last year. Europe and vitally Ukraine are hoping very much that this year's conference will be a little smoother.
I think it's quite doubtful, even though I think the fact that it is Marco Rubio, I think he's one of the more sane members of the Trump cabinet. And once again, when it comes to Ukraine, don't forget that he was one of the harshest critics of Russia's invasion and the more stalwart proponents of arming Ukraine back in the day, right? What concerns me is the presence of the deputy of Mr. Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, Elbridge Colby, who is a very well-known isolationist and is one of the more pronounced, I think, prominent voices within the administration against continuing to arm Ukraine. So, I'm not very hopeful that the tone of the, American diplomacy has changed decisively. Meanwhile, we're talking about, continuing rounds of negotiations around Ukraine, which lead to exactly nothing. Instead, winning Vladimir Putin time to continue terrorizing civilians. Just this last night, another attack of several dozen ballistic missiles in Kyiv and hundreds of drones, which resulted in over tens of thousands of the Kyivan families without water and heat this morning.
Yeah, we're getting some news coming into us. Mark Rutte at the start of the NATO conference today. He's been announcing, no details really yet, but a collaboration between Europe and Canada to keep Ukraine strong in defence, as he put it. The UK Defence Minister also announcing contributions of £500 million. That kind of thing helps, obviously.
It does help, and this is, of course, some of these, there's a lag of time. It will take time to feel the effects of whatever agreements are hashed out, but I think this is also a matter of morale for our fighting men and women to feel that we're not alone. I'm encouraged that at Munich we will have our new defense minister, Mikhailo Fedorov, who is considered kind of a whiz kid when it comes to cutting-edge technologies, which the European officials themselves have been acknowledging. Ukraine is the one who will be sharing the experience and maybe eventually training European NATO soldiers rather than the other way around. And so I think we can also expect some sort of agreements to finally launch some of those areas where Europe and Ukraine can start producing weapons and, of course, drones jointly. This, of course, cannot happen too soon because, this asymmetrical warfare that is enabled by the clever use of drones is really the only thing right now that is keeping Ukraine in this fight against a much larger enemy.
Let's talk, of course, about those talks that you mentioned. Ukraine, Russia and the US still sitting down. We're getting little bit of information coming out about what those talks might lead to, even talks about a referendum being held there in Ukraine about whether people there are happy with the result, possible elections even before the summer. I mean, how are people there? How are you feeling about the way these talks seem to be developing?
I think this is once again a situation where the Ukrainian side cannot just simply slam its door on all this talk about referendum and negotiations. And even President Zelensky himself has not encouraged this talk, but kind of gone along with it to really mean that if there are conditions for that, to hold presidential elections, that would presuppose Russians agreeing on some sort of a durable ceasefire, then we can do that. But I just don't see the preconditions for that. Just to cut to the chase, I don't think the referendum or the elections will be happening. But this is something that the Russian side is trying actively and has been trying actively to sell to the American counterparts to increase pressure on Zelensky. And Americans have been also known to sort of play along without maybe, delving into all the intricacies of what that means. And once again, my analysis remains the same. Holding presidential elections or a referendum such as this in time of war is a recipe for disaster, for chaos. And that's exactly why Russia at this point is trying to push this through in the absence of serious breakthroughs on the front lines. We see this, increase of terror against civilians and this other way that Russia is trying to destabilize Ukrainian politics.
And what do you see as the main sticking point? Is it still territory?
I think territory, but once again, territory is a red herring. Once again, you look at Putin's demands. I mean, they've sort of undergone an evolution. It's the Russian side is now not talking about just the Donbass, but Kherson and Zaporizhia. And I think this is, essentially a way for Putin to gain what he hasn't been able to do on the battlefield. And if he's given that, Ukrainians, I think, very rightfully fear that this will only whet the appetite of Vladimir Putin for continued aggression after maybe a certain period of cessation of hostilities.
I'd like to end by asking you, if I can, a more personal question. You're there in Kyiv. Of course, we're hearing a lot about the politics. I think people also want to know about what life is like there at the moment. You mentioned the overnight attacks, more energy facilities targeted. I mean, what is it like being an individual living in Kyiv at the moment?
It's tough, of course. It's colder than ever. And there are a lot of unhappy folks, and there's a lot of blame game going on as far as who is really at fault, other than the enemy, of course. But why hasn't there been enough preparation work for this eventuality, etc.? And some of it is fair, some of it is not. Still, Ukrainians remain resilient. There's a phenomenon of these raves, electronic raves on ice, where young people come out, in below freezing temperatures and dance to electronic music. This is a way to also signal to the enemy that this sort of terror against civilians will not enable Putin to achieve his goals.
So still people very resilient, would you say?
Indeed, indeed.
Good to get your views today. Thank you very much for talking to us. Peter Zalmayev, from Kyiv, Director of the Eurasia Democracy Initiative. Thanks very much once again for your analysis here on France 24.